a moment to stretch your arms, legs, and for those of you who want to move from cushion to chair, do so. We still aren't huggers yet, but if you want to give somebody a bump or a wave or a smile, whatever you want to do is fine in that regard. Okay, Zoomers okay? Okay, good. All right. For those of you who came in late and came on late, I'm Larry Dawalt, and we are in the midst of our summer Sutta series. Tonight is part 3. And I know you've been wondering which one it's going to be tonight. Some of you have just been waiting, what does it say, bated breath, whatever, whatever that means. Just a word about the suttas. For most Buddhists, the suttas are the most interesting and valuable part of the Pali Canon. There are over 10,000 suttas in the canon. So I have a lot to choose from. Although the majority of them are very short, a page or less. There's the Nikāya, the Majjhima Nikāya, the Samyutta Nikāya, the Anguttara Nikāya, which is this one, the numerical discourses of the Buddha. Also very good for ironing clothes. If you want to just set it down there, you can just move it over and move it back. And then the Khuddaka Nikāya. There's a quote I like from the Dhammapada, just a minute. I did want to say that when we are doing these suttas as Dharma leaders, we're wanting to share, and I will want to share with you tonight why this is important to me, what this is doing and has done for my practice. And as I communicate that, I invite you to see if you want to adapt it a little bit and look it up. A quote I like from the Dhammapada: how many holy words you read, how many you speak, what good will they do if you do not act upon them? One more time. How many holy words you read, how many you speak, what good will they do if you do not act upon them? So the personal message I would want to give even before I start is, this is one that I've been making an effort to act upon. The title is The Traditions of the Noble Ones. It's AN 428, and it's right there. But I'm going to read it off of here because the print there a little too small for you. These 4 traditions of the noble ones, original, long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated from the beginning, are not open to suspicion, will never be open to suspicion, and are unfaulted by knowledgeable contemplatives and Brahmins. Which 4? There's the case where a monk is content with any old robe cloth at all. He speaks in praise of being content with any robe cloth. He doesn't, for the sake of robe cloth, do anything unseemly or inappropriate. Not getting cloth, he isn't agitated. Getting cloth, he uses it unattached to it, uninfatuated, guiltless, seeing the drawbacks of attachment to it, and discerning the escape from them. He doesn't, on account of his contentment with any old robe cloth at all, exalt himself or disparage others. In this, he is diligent, deft, alert, and mindful. This is said to be a monk standing firm in the ancient original traditions of the noble ones. And further, the monk is content with any old alms food at all. He speaks in praise of being content with any old alms food at all. He doesn't, for the sake of alms food, do anything unseemly or inappropriate. Not getting alms food, he isn't agitated. Getting alms food, he uses it unattached to it, uninfatuated, guiltless, seeing the drawbacks of attachment to it, and discerning the escape from them. He doesn't, on account of his contentment with any old alms food at all, exalt himself or disparage others. In this he is diligent, deaf, alert, and mindful. This is said to be a monk standing firm in the ancient original traditions of the noble ones. And further, the monk is content with any old lodging at all. He speaks in praise of being content with any old lodging at all, and he doesn't, for the sake of lodging, do anything unseemly or inappropriate. Getting lodging, he isn't agitated. Getting lodging, he uses it unattached to it, uninfatuated, guiltless, seeing the drawbacks of attachment to it and discerning the escape from them. He doesn't, on account of his contentment with any old lodging at all, exalt himself or disparage others. In this he is diligent, deaf, alert, and mindful. This is said to be a monk standing firm in the ancient original traditions of the noble ones. And further, the monk finds pleasure and delight in developing skillful qualities, finds pleasure and delight in abandoning unskillful qualities. He doesn't, on account of his pleasure and delight in developing and abandoning, exalt himself or disparage others. In this he is diligent, deaf, alert, and mindful. This is said to be a monk standing firm in the ancient original traditions of the noble ones. These are the four traditions of the noble ones: original, long-standing, traditional, ancient, unadulterated, which are not open to suspicion, will never be open to suspicion, and are unfaulted by knowledgeable contemplatives and Brahmins. So let's talk about these first three. Instead of robes, I'm just going to call it clothes. Let's think about clothing in the time of the Buddha. It's basically homemade. Fortunately, in that area, wonderful cotton. There was silk, there was wool. But a robe took place, came together with looms and various dyeing methods. And a robe was sort of like meals that my mother used to serve when we complained. She said, what you get is what you got. And that's a lot different than what's going on with us, isn't it? Today, clothing is readily available in various colors. Do you know how many shades of blue there are? From that, Carolina blue, there's a little blue, there's a blue, there's a blue, they're just everywhere. Clothes for every occasion. Fashion is an industry. We have catalogs, online shopping, malls, boutiques, and specialty shops. I'm so afraid of getting stuck with something I don't like. When I buy on Amazon, I make sure there is a place close by where I can take it. I'm working on it. Food in the time of the Buddha. The monks ate was put into their bowls, and that was it. Many of the householders had limited choices as well. They ate what they had. But when the monks went out to gather alms, they had their bowl, off with their shoes, off they went. And when they held the bowl up, they got one spoonful. And then came the next one spoonful, and then came the next. And I remember when I was at Empty Cloud in New Jersey on Sunday, a meal was brought in, and we were to give alms to the monks. And we had our little plate, and they came around, and we just took one spoonful and put it in. Now, that sounds good if there's 4 or 5 monks. What if there's 20? And you get to the end. Maybe you got something in your bowl. Maybe you didn't. But as the Sutta says, They were to be content. They put it all together, and that's where the meal came from. Today, there are still people who have to eat what they have, and there are some in our society who have little or nothing to eat. But there are many who can afford basically what they want. And the choices are incredible at grocery stores. We are celebrating in the little town that I live in South Carolina, because after 8 years of promise, the third week of June, we got a Harris Teeter. I know that doesn't mean much to those of you close to Matthews, but to those of us who don't have a Harris Teeter, and who, when they come up from Beaufort, bring a cooler, and did so for 3 years while I was working, coming up on Tuesday and going back on Thursday, bringing a cooler so I could shop at Harris Teeter. Well, this is really nice. Restaurants. Have you been right there south of Highway 51? The restaurant choices are unreal. It doesn't make any difference where you live or where you're from. All kinds of restaurants are really nice. And this is what we're used to. Various diets can be accommodated. I'm gluten-free. It's a different kind of society. Lodging for the monks, it was at times under shelter, but sometimes that shelter may have come from the cover of a tree. We're told that the enlightenment came under the Bodhi tree. And there are monks still that live way out. And we talk about the Thai forest tradition. It's a lot different from where we live now and what we have. Many of us live comfortably, home ownership, something to which many aspire. But far too many, for far too many, home may be the street, under a bridge, or in a different place every night. And I remember more than once working in hospice care, we had patients that we had to find. They were under hospice care, but we didn't know where they were going to be. We didn't know where they were staying that particular night. So what are the lessons here? The first one's contentment. Being content with what we have. The second one is non-attachment. The Sutta says they had this and they consumed, but they did so unattached. And then they also did not exalting self or disparaging others. And the first time I read this, I thought about clothing, food, and lodging. And after I read that, I thought that the Buddha perhaps went on to something similar, like maybe physical appearance, vocation, social standing. But instead, rather than going outside again, the Sutta goes inside. The Buddha speaks about finding pleasure and delight in developing skillful qualities, and finding pleasure and delight in abandoning unskillful qualities. I remember in Dharma leader training, how nice it was to get one of those lessons. And I enjoyed all 3 of them that I got. It was really nice to be able to have some sort of accomplishment by looking at those lessons and developing skillful qualities. You say, well, where do we find these? I mean, is there one concise place where we find them? And there is. And this is it. I'll hold it up for you guys, those of you who want to maybe take a screenshot. This book is called The Noble Eightfold Path, Way to the End of Suffering, Bhikkhu Bodhi. And if you're going to possibly put it all in one place, this is my opinion, as close as you can come. I have it like this. I have it in the car. I listen to it whenever I can. But there's explanations here that are very valuable in terms of what is skillful and what is unskillful. And regarding the 4 traditions of the noble ones, I want to read you this quote from Thanissaro Bhikkhu. who said, across the board in all four, the Buddha also said that you don't exalt yourself for abiding by these customs. And you don't disparage others who don't. In other words, we follow these customs not to be better than other people, but simply because we ourselves are suffering. If you're not satisfied with your clothing, are you suffering? If you're not satisfied with your food, are you suffering? Not satisfied with your lodging or where you live? That could be a form of suffering. This is something we have to keep in mind all the time, he writes. It's what the teaching is all about. The fact that we're suffering, we've got stress, we've got discontent and distress in our mind. We have to look at that. And we can look at that through our practice. Two things about the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path. Bhikkhu Bodhi writes in his book that the Four Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path contain the doctrine and the discipline. On the one hand, there's the doctrine, the Four Noble Truths, and then there's the discipline of the Noble Eightfold Path. The doctrine, he writes, brings understanding. The discipline brings practice. So when we talk about our practice, we're not necessarily just talking about our meditation on the cushion. We're talking about our meditation off the cushion as well. We're talking about how we live. We're talking about how we deal with each other, how we deal with those that perhaps we're good with, and those perhaps that are a little more difficult. I know you don't have any like that, but I've got some. They know where I live. It's crazy. Contentment, not attachment. The Dalai Lama wrote, if one's life is simple, contentment has to come. Simplicity is extremely important for happiness. Having few desires, feeling satisfied with what you have is very vital. Satisfaction with just enough food, clothing, and shelter to protect yourself from the elements. The Buddha said health is the greatest gift, contentment the greatest wealth, faithfulness the best relationship. How many holy words you read, how many you speak, what good will they do if you do not act upon them? Contentment, non-attachment, not exalting self nor disparaging others, finding pleasure and delight in developing skillful qualities, and finding pleasure and delight in abandoning unskillful qualities. This is our joy. This is our practice. Let's sit for a moment.